crazy how time goes.
Well, good evening. It's Sunday, and it's Sunday's Thought Conditioner. I'm Doug Snyder. This is Intimacy with God Ministries. Thanks for joining me. Tonight, we've got a fun word, provision. Provision. Now, you got to wonder why I'm broadcasting in the dark. Well, I'm broadcasting in the dark because most of us are still living in provision in the dark ages, or in the dark, and we haven't transferred our thinking from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. This morning I was preaching, and I started off with Matthew 14:17, and just stated right out front, but Jesus, we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish, and you know the story. It's one of the 2 times that Jesus fed the multitudes, in this case the 5,000, and with women and children, maybe upwards of 20,000 people were there. And the disciples were reasoning with Jesus. Jesus had said, go feed them. And they were reasoning. They said, well, we don't have the food, we don't have the money, we don't have the provision. It's in a desert place. Where are they? Just send the people away. And Jesus said, no, you feed them. So Jesus said, bring the 5 loaves and fish to me. He lifted it up before heaven, prayed, blessed it, and multiplied it and fed all those, and had much left over. Oh my. So, does God have provision? Is God enough? That's the question. Is God enough? Is God enough for you? Have you ever reasoned with God? But God, we don't have this, or we don't have that. Or you are stuck in a place. Maybe it's a decision you need to make, or maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a need or a lack that you have. Maybe you don't have enough provision of money. Maybe it's food, or I don't know what it is. But the question is God enough? So if you look at earlier in the chapter, Jesus is coming across the lake, steps out of the boat, sees the crowds, has compassion on them, and begins to heal them. Now, out of 20,000 people, 5% is about 1,000 people. So he could have been, and I'm sure that's a small amount, a small percentage compared to what it could have actually been. But Jesus is healing these people. He heals every one of them. He doesn't leave anybody out. So does God have the compassion and the power to heal? Yes or no? You know, later on, and I think it's Matthew 17, Jesus' disciple is questioned from a religious leader, does your master pay the temple tax? And he says, yes, he does. Well, then that disciple goes to Jesus. They have a discussion. Jesus says, go down to the lake, open up the first fish's mouth that you catch, the mouth of the first fish you catch, and in it you'll find a gold or coin to pay the temple tax. Stop. Rewind. Did Jesus just send his disciple down to the lake to get a fish to pull a coin out of its mouth to pay the temple tax? He did. I just love that story. It's very creative. It's supply, it's provision. You know, God provides in a very creative way. And I think that's another question. Does God have enough money for your provision? Can he supply enough for you to do what you're supposed to do? Yes or no? And the side question is, do you believe God has unlimited creativity in how to provide or make provision for you? Yes or no? I mean, there's story after story in Scripture where we see Jesus' authority over nature, where Jesus walks on the water. Or another time where Jesus is sleeping in the boat and the disciples are afraid they're going to get swamped or capsized, and they wake up Jesus, and he stands up. He calms the wind and the waves, and the disciples are like, oh my, who is this that even the wind and the waves obey him? And Jesus has said to them, oh, why are you so afraid? You have so little faith. So, does God have power and authority over the wind and the waves? Yes or no? And these questions really reveal where our faith is at, how far transformed our mind is. Because Paul says, my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches and glory. And in another passage, I think it's Philippians, God has given you everything you need for life and godliness. Everything. So if all of our provision is taken care of, what's left? Well, I think rest. We can rest. When Jesus says it is finished, he completed his assignment, but he also completed it for everything else. He is the second Adam. And what was it like in the garden? Well, Adam and Eve were stewards. God provided for everything, but they were stewards of the earth. They gave it all away. They gave all that authority away. And Satan took over, and Jesus came to reclaim it again. Matthew 28, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Now go make disciples. In other words, go, multiply, be fruitful, subdue the earth. Have God's government surround the earth and rule over creation, because that's how much authority God gave us. But when Jesus came, he had supplied, he shows us how God has supplied everything that we need. All we have to do is trust and do our assignment. But we get all goofed up. The reason why I walked up in the dark and started recording in the dark is because we still think back to where we have to do the work. We have to do the provision. We have to provide for ourselves. But you know what? The Babylonian system of buying and selling, as Bill Winston says, I love Bill Winston's message on this, the Babylonian system was never meant to be the provision for the sons and daughters of God. No, God is to be the provider, and he says so. I have provided for everything. So, provision. Got to learn, get our thinking back. This is just a short little taste of it. I hope to do more of it later on, maybe in another format. But provision. Is God enough? Yes or no? I'm Doug Snyder, Intimacy with God Ministries. Thanks for joining me tonight. God bless you. Have a great week.